All right, and now I will make us go live on Facebook.
Awesome. Are we live?
Not yet. All right, we are live.
Awesome. Day. Good day to everyone. Happy Wednesday, Webinar Wednesdays for Native American Heritage Month with the Minnesota Indian Women's Sexual Assault Coalition. And we are out on round 3 for Where is the Love in our communities. We did one on families and communities. Where is the love when bystander against violence is involved? Then last week we did rural and isolated communities. And today we're gonna do men and boys. So welcome, welcome, welcome. Happy to have you all here. We're gonna dig in a minute, but as per the usual, we're gonna do alphabetical for equity, do quick bios, and along with your bio and introducing yourself, how you feeling today? I think we'll start with that question. So Angelica, how are you feeling today?
I'm feeling pretty good, thank you. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. My name is Angelica Allery. My spirit name is Nibi Nabekwe. I am an enrolled member of the Sisseton Wahpeton Oyate, and I'm here in St. Paul, Minnesota, bringing you the lovely conversation that comes with me. I'm feeling pretty good. I had some work through some things earlier this morning, and I'm feeling refreshed, and I'm ready to enjoy and dive deep into our conversation for what's to come. So thank you.
Awesome. And Cinnamon, alphabetically. Hi, Cinnamon. How are you feeling today?
Good afternoon, Rebecca. I am feeling good. I feel accomplished. I got a lot done today. So thank you. My name is Cinnamon Banky. I'm the Tribal Sex Assault Service Program Technical Assistance for MIWSAC. And I've been doing this work for about 20 years now. And I love MIWSAC. And I appreciate the topic we're talking about today. And am looking forward to it very much so. And just a shout out to all the TSAS grantees, and we have a couple new ones as well. So thank you. Christine.
Bonjour, everybody. Giwatayashi Kindigo, Mikizi and Dodem, Gawa Baganikagish and Don Jiba. I am Christine Davidson in English, and I'm with the Minnesota Indian Women's Sexual Assault Coalition as the Education and Cultural Coordinator for lots of years too. I got a cold, so I'm feeling a little congested, but thinking about the menfolk and the young men and boys, children in our communities is something very close to my heart, very sacred work. So I'm really happy to be here for this convo. Miiglaich.
Wogala, thank you, Christine. And Jolene, how are you doing today?
I am both a bundle of energy right now, as well as trying to balance some family medical things right now. So kind of holding multiple truths, which I think we're probably going to be dealing a lot with today. My name is Jolene Engelking, and I started out doing advocacy about 15 years ago, and I've now been doing this national training and technical assistance for the last 6 or 7 years. And most excitedly, I've been with MIWSAC for the last 1.5 years, and I do some work under our OVC Project Beacon, so working in some urban Indian communities around sex trafficking. And I am also just really excited about being here. I am a White Earth descendant, and I'm just really looking forward to this much, much needed conversation.
And hello, Miss Tami. How are you doing today?
Cold, but I don't know why. It started to get chilly here. I guess we expect that in Alaska, don't we? So I am Tami Jerue, And I work for the Alaska Native Women's Resource Center, and I'm gonna, I'm in a new space, and I think I'm allergic to something. And so, excuse me. I was thinking about this last night, and I have my dear friend, Shirley Moses, who passed recently. And she always said, the one thing she said is that our first responders are our children, are usually the first responders. So when I was thinking about the question about how long I might have been doing this work, I've been doing this work since I was a child. Yet officially, I've been doing the work for well over 40 years. And somebody asked me recently, why do you continue to do the work? And I had to really think hard about that. But you know what? It's always about, of course, crisis and safety, but it's also about change. It's change work. So when we talk about men and boys, we have to, they're half of us, so we have to include them. So we have to look at this in a way that both is protective, accountable, but also preventable. So that's what my thoughts were for the day.
Thank you so much for that. That is exactly, you know, when the team came together with these titles of how we were going to talk about where's the love in our families, where's the love in our communities, in rural, how does it show up, and in leadership, like that love piece is huge. And I know there's quite a few of us on staff that have kids, right? And male relatives in our community, and it has to be love and inclusive. Otherwise, we swing too far in one direction. So that is a beautiful and elegant way to open our webinar today. So thank you, Tami, because it's true. We love our family members. Sometimes they're not perfect. Sometimes they're injured, and sometimes we need to face them with that accountability. But how do we balance loving them at the same time, right? Yeah. So I think that's a great way to get started. How do I feel today? Keep on keeping on. That's what I got. That's how I'm rolling. I do some of the sex trafficking work at MIWSAC, and I love it so much. Excuse me. There's sick people all over the place, right? So I got a cougher in the background. So this will be recorded so we can share it as a resource and product and share it with your membership too, because this conversation doesn't happen too often, which is one of the beautiful things about doing this for our Native Month, because it's talking about what's happening in our communities. I'm out here on the East Coast in a state that doesn't even have a state recognized tribe. So our Indigenous community looks so different than Tami in Alaska or the Colorado or Minnesota. But the consistent theme is men and boys when we're talking about violence against girls and women or LGBTQ, all of our community members does intersect statistically with men and boys. And you okay, babe? That's okay. How do we face it? How do we address it? How do we do prevention? How do we do outreach? So these are all the things that we can talk about today, just like we're at a kitchen table. But on the other hand, there's also sometimes going to be rugged truths that are said. So, you know, trigger disclaimer or aberration disclaimer too, because this stuff can get really hard. So I guess my first question, how are we going to pack it into an hour, right? How are we going to keep it simple but go there? So I'm just winging it out there to anyone who wants to answer. How do we tell our families and communities that are experiencing this? How do we initiate change in our communities when we know being a male bystander comes with, sometimes it's just as simple as loyalty, but in other ways, that's my question. How does it show up? What are the problems that we're seeing? How is, you know, why would, for my children, why would my child have a problem stepping forward and intervening against violence? How does that show up?
So I have two boys, as you know. They're adults, young men now. And one of the thoughts when we were talking about these topics was I was really, really thankful to include the conversation about men and boys and where they fit within our work. And I only have boys, and I've watched different struggles that they've been through as well. But I think as a whole, so I look at men and boys as a piece of keeping our balance, right? In tribal ways, in a tribal community, and within our families. And as we move through our everyday lives, and a piece of maintaining that balance, that male-female balance as well. The other thing that I've seen is the hesitation with some men with intervening because of most, how do I want to say it? Maybe our views towards men as only being the offenders, right? That's one piece of it. The other thought that came to my mind was, I think, largely untalked about, and we don't, because we don't know the true statistics, the true numbers of our men that are also victims, whether as an adult or as a child, and surviving boarding school. So I think there's a couple layers that we can look at when it comes to men and boys. So when I think of men and boys, those are things that I think of. And so thank you.
I love that that comes from the love of your family, and that when you're doing your work, you're taking the journey with keeping your boys around and as part of the conversation. That's brilliant. Thank you. Any other thoughts about the issue of men and boys as bystander? What do we need from them? How does it show up, and how can we change it? Any thoughts?
Oh, go ahead, Tami. I had similar thoughts to you, Cinnamon, in terms of one of the things that I think is not talked about enough is the impact of sexual violence on our entire community, right? And to somehow we have learned to make assumptions that a boy or a man who has experienced sexual violence is going to respond to it any differently than a woman would, right? Like, I don't know how else to word it other than that. Why would we think that their response to being victimized or silenced or invisibilized would be any different than our experiences with violence as women folk, right? So one of the things I feel like is probably a barrier to speaking out in community against it is they've been silenced a lot too. And so what does it look like for us to create an invitation or an open space for them to feel like they can and should and must stand up and interrupt when things are happening around us, because it is happening every day out in our communities. It's happening in our own homes in little ways and big ways. Oh yeah. Thank you. Thank you to slow down. I have a lot of thoughts on it, right? Yeah. It's just a multifaceted thing all the time, because it's in our own homes. It's with people that we love. It's, people who are trying to do good things in the world, and then people who are always constantly learning. And so I think learning new ways, taking risks, these are some of the things that I think about speaking up in community.
I think this is a challenging question, and not just around the issue of men and boys, but I think that what Cinnamon said maybe earlier too, about the fact that we often look at the perpetrator or abuser more in the role of men, that's not necessarily as true potentially as it used to be, maybe, or we weren't seeing it. It's just like when the movement really became much more vocal about the victimization of women and girls. It was early 70s, and we were hearing about it was starting to become known. And I think that our society embarrasses boys and men in such a way that they don't want to be perceived as weak. Being perceived as weak, I think, it's something, it's almost like a hidden thing. It's like being an auntie. I have many nephews, and I talk to my nephews, have had serious situations in their lives. But you know, my nephews are as in need of their auntie as my nieces. And I have a lot of those as well. And I think the biggest piece that we have to sometimes remember is, why aren't we showing the same kind of love and compassion? Now, that doesn't excuse, and this is the part that we have to, even with, I know that I've had this conversation many times with many of my young male relatives. It does not excuse your bad behavior. It doesn't mean that I don't love you, but you cannot get away with this because other people are allowing you to get away with this. Again, I can love you, but still you need to be accountable for your behavior. And I think that's the hard part as bystanders, whether you're a boy, whether you're a man, but how much of us are silencing in our own homes? If we have young boys that are witnessing some kind of violence in their homes or in their communities or where they feel safe, and then they turn around and they are breaking the silence. So outside, when they may see this going on, it's almost like that whole kick in of breaking that silence. And that's a pretty courageous thing to do. And that's a hard thing to do because that's not, unfortunately, happening all the time. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that was just, again, a thought that I had about that.
Tami, there's a cost to breaking the silence, right? And especially in our own communities where we don't want to disrupt anymore, but there's a cost, and sometimes they can be punished. Yeah.
There's like so many thoughts that come bubbling up because we're talking about a very complex subject. But something that came up to me, and that I've like even in my own circle of family, there have been young boys who maybe revealed themselves to other family members or maybe reenacted certain things, and we kind of just shame them, like, oh, don't do that, like, why are you doing that, and kind of shame them out, but then don't get to the root of like, why are you this young and kind of have this knowledge of of doing those certain things, and kind of just leaving it as like, don't do that, like shame them in the corner or don't even talk about it, like but having conversations, even how am I trying to put this in a way that I can understand it, having young people, young children, even youth, understand a lot more than we think, and having conversations about sexuality and even of harm that has been done to them, they can perceive because they've either experienced it and are wondering and left questioning themselves, or are trying to display the same kind of behavior that they've been taught or perped on by someone either in their own family or in an older relative or a close friend. And so I think that a way that we can interrupt certain behavior even with our young youth and our young children is to ask them questions, ask them, do they feel safe in spaces with family or in community, and asking them, do they feel comfortable sharing what had happened to them, and just having open conversation, and keeping it okay, keeping the conversation normal, because when we don't have conversations and we think it's taboo, then they are going to obviously start hiding things and not talk about things, and then think it's okay to just keep doing what they're doing. And so when Cinnamon, you were talking about boarding schools, I was thinking that we are not very far removed from that, that systemic violence. And, we are only a couple generations from being raped in school, and by people that were supposed to look after us, teach us whatever ways that we were supposed to learn, right? And so the younger that we can start having more comfortable conversations on sexuality, sexual abuse, and knowing and saying, I love you, that was not okay. You don't ever deserve that, that touch or those feelings of uncomfortability, of unknowing. But to have our young boys and young men heard, or just, they don't even have to disclose all of the hurt that they have, received from loved ones or people in community or even in schools, but to know that that behavior is not okay, but I'm going to love you through it, and I'm going to be here no matter what. And that type of, silence breaking, or just making it okay that you can feel these feelings and be hurt, but to work through it, I guess. And just knowing it starts from home too. And I guess that's what I wanted to add.
Thank you for that, Angelica. That was awesome. So many good points. It does start at home, right? Unhealthy families versus healthy families. And sometimes it's a little bit of both. And then, we know abuse is a cycle, and it's learned behaviors, and it takes a lot of healthy risk to stand up and say, I'm not going to be the next one, the next generation, whatever that looks like. I was thinking about how it shows up, and, I've been around, traveled a lot. I'm hybrid love story, so I'm multiple things, but just thinking about from Alaska to out here where I am in Pennsylvania or Minnesota, Colorado, Seminole, Maine, Arizona, it can look very much the same because of the cycles of abuse or violence. And a little bit of storytelling, just so we can get to the what do we need from our men and boys as our allies, our helpers, and people that we love. Thinking about an elder who told a story of his own experience that as a teenager back in the day, the perception from his environment was when he could slap her or hit her, that's when he knew he was going steady officially as a teenager, right? And that's really, really intense to have that perception, or that was the mindset of a teenager. And I think lots have changed, that now we're, domestic violence and sexual violence and trafficking is now in the mix. It's in the news, it's on social media. So we have a lot more opportunity to share information. But when we're in isolated communities or in rural communities, it's harder to do that outreach. And we have to do that outreach from the family, but also from schools, right? It has to be in academia. It has to be outreach with youth too, because I think there's an element that still exists in a different way, but OnlyFans, Twitter, cyberbullying, there's still these trends of peer pressure and what the social expectation is, right? And then how does it show up? How do we see it? I'm going to put it in the chat. Well, I'll put it on the Facebook page. A call to men talks about the man box and men speaking to men and boys speaking to boys on basketball teams and skaters and rodeos and tournaments. The things still exist, like don't cry like a girl or don't be a bitch, right? So there's still this machismo that exists where you're stronger for standing up against wrong instead of being machismo or being a super hyper male by allowing buying of sex and sex trafficking, or knowing that your homeboy is abusing their girlfriend. And just because you're a dude and you're a good friend to this dude, you're not going to say anything and cause problems. So I think that's some of the ways that I've seen it show up. And it's not easy. Like, everyone here, we're women. So when we speak on these terms, we're speaking from what we would love to see from our men and boys, right? Which is different from the conversations that men and boys can have with each other. So as women, what would we ask them? What do we want to see from our men and boys to stop being bystanders against violence against women? What do we need from them? What would we like to see in ceremony, at rodeo, at powwow, and at the home, in our homes? What would we need from them if we could just ask, make some wishes?
I'll jump in and just I keep thinking, and I think it's hard because in comparison to some folks, I'm not really around too many men in my life. I mean, I have a wonderful dad. I mean, he's in the hospital right now, so that's what I'd mentioned. But I mean, I grew up in a very matriarchal family. I have a ton of male cousins. I didn't really grow up around them just because of, we just lived so far rural that it was hard to see folks. Until I came to MIWSAC, I had never worked full-time with a man before. And so to me, it's just interesting. I've had very little men, like few men in my life. But in thinking about like the conversations, that I've had with my friends with all this kind of stuff, and there's so many levels we could go with it, but I think part of it is really just communication. I mean, I know that there's many levels we can unpack when it comes to power and control and all of that, but I'm thinking about even my friends who, when they're dating or in their marriages, and how it's still so hard for them to even talk about, healthy sexuality with their partners, and to express wants and consent, even within those kind of relationships, has been so difficult. And so at a bare minimum, I feel that having good, healthy conversation about healthy sexuality and how that impacts all of, the being, I think is just something that's so important. And talking to kids about that as they're growing up. I mean, male, female, all of the different genders, I think we all need to be talking about that. I think it's just one component. And so that's what I got.
Jolene, as you're talking, it makes me think of my father and the role that he's plays in my life and throughout my life, along with my uncles and my male cousins. My best friend growing up through school was a male. And I was thinking of what it was that they did for me that helped me feel safe and secure. And I think about my grandfather, and my grandfather, when he passed away, he had two really close friends that are male, and they both took me under their wing. So, but one of the things that they did for me really was create that safe space with me, and checked in with me, like, how are you doing? How was it being part of whatever it was? When we would travel, it was the same thing. I would have my uncle with me or my father with me, and it was always that safety net, but it was in such a loving way, and creating that loving, caring space, that I felt that balance. So even right after high school, my first job, I worked with all men. There was 15, 16 men, and I was the only woman in that metal spinning factory. So my experience has been really, really good is when it comes to that piece of it. So if I was to pick something that I wanted from men, I really appreciated that communication, communication in that safe space that they created for me.
So I could think of all kinds of things. So through MIWSAC and throughout my life, I've worked with quite a few men, right? MIWSAC as a coalition has committed to digging in and doing our best to invite that balance, right? We can't end sexual violence and all the forms of violence without all of us doing the work. And I guess what I would love to see is that fearless self-reflection to just say, man, I have an entire culture around me that is telling me one thing, but I have something in my DNA, in my spirit, in my soul that is different than that. And to connect with it, connect whatever it is inside of your spirit, to be a part of our community and be a part of our families, and whatever self-work has to be done, just do it. It's going to look different for everybody. I think I have to do self-work every day, right? And I have support around me to do that. So if there's some kind of support that menfolk need, they, reach out to one another, hold up one another, be there for each other. Don't be afraid of whatever. I don't know what the fear is, right? Like, are you afraid of being like shamed out for having your feelings, or, you know what I'm saying? Like, just be fearless about that and show up for young folks because they're watching you. We did a poster series not this long ago, and some of the best imagery is the little kids playing and saying, we're watching you, because they are, right? They're seeing what you say, what you do, how we are treated. Do you get up and help with the dishes, or do you get up and help with the meal? There's real tangible ways to demonstrate that you are an integral part of our family and our community. And so break down whatever you've taught or you've been taught, or whatever you're learning from the societies around us, and just do the right thing within our families and communities. Yeah.
Christine, when you're talking, it made me think about this idea of how can men balance that idea of, stepping up and being in these spaces and talking about things while also still allowing space for women? Because I think that sometimes I've heard like men say that they feel that it's it's a contradiction. Like if they step up too much, it's bad. But if they don't step up enough, they're not, showing up enough. And I didn't know if you had any thoughts on that, or, anybody else, but.
Oh, I got thoughts. No. So it's scary to step up and say something when you're seeing something in community, right? It's scary for us as women, for sure. But I think we have a responsibility to say something when we see something in our communities, right? So that means, who are they asking to do the opening prayer? Who are they asking to sing an honor song? Who are they asking to do a ceremony? Who are they inviting into the community to do these ceremonies? There is so many ways that we could interrupt, and rather than maintain our silence about it or say that's somebody else's job. Well, so-and-so should say something. That's what we need to interrupt. We keep wanting to put it onto somebody else, but yet we each have a responsibility. And the more and more each of us step up and take responsibility, the more we model it, the more we get comfortable, the normalizing that Angelica was talking about, the more we'll all feel like we have a say, because we do. I don't know why we think we don't have a say. I don't know why men think they don't have a say. We just have to take the risk and do it, I think. And do you get some backlash from people who want you to keep quiet about things? Yes. Do we have a real risk of being punished and shamed out and ostracized from people that we love and care about? Yes, it's possible. But the more we do it, the stronger our communities become, because we're saying no to people who are going to use their positions of power and authority and gifts to hurt people, right? Yeah. I got lots of thoughts.
I love that. And this is some rugged stuff here. And I apologize that I'm not going to sound like a hippie for the next 3 minutes. I'm just not. We know, and we're going to talk about this next week too, But we know there are tricksters and there are liars that show up for some folks as charming and a leader and all the things, right? And then behind the scenes, there are harm doers, tricksters doing violence and oppressive things. And it's about dividing the community. And Christine, just what you said was so poignant, because we do have to be brave and stand up. And as Angelica said, normalize it, because it is so scary to be the one to stand up in just a hypothetical group of 50 people that have loyalty for what the personality they've been shown is all they know. And when you contradict that, that's very difficult. Now, if we up the ante and add to someone who has power and influence, really popular, that's even more difficult. And in this day and age, we know what that can equal: hate crimes, casual cruelty, online, what's it called? Cancel culture, all of that. And it's, I think, just thinking through the lens of my children, how difficult it is, especially in youth, against peer pressure. I want this to change. And I think it is starting to change, that being that safe person that Cinnamon was talking about, which totally pulled my heartstrings in the best way. I thought of my Pap, how he was so safe for me. He was one of the most, I miss him so much, but he was such a symbol of positive masculinity and manhood for me, because I felt so safe. And if we can inspire men to talk to other men about, that's being a badass, that's being the baller, is being a good man and standing up against the wrong. But how do we get there? It's all of that, right? It's all of that. Tami, did you have any other thoughts? Thank you.
Well, I always have a few thoughts, but you know, this is challenging in terms of, you know, we have people that are really brave in our communities and around us in most things, I have to say. And in their bravery, they have done just incredible changes. And sometimes when you hear of someone or know of someone who is committing what you consider just a total atrocity to someone else, I think sometimes the first thing that happens is our minds close it down. Our minds can't believe it. You know, they don't want to believe that. And then you're exactly right when you say, and then there's always that person in the community that everybody says, well, why don't you do something about it? Why don't you do something about it? Because they can't, for whatever reason, come forward. And so that person then tries to right the wrong, so to speak. And so that's where the courage, you see that courage just in the standing up. So how do we support that in our communities? Man, woman, child. How do we support that truly? Because when you support that courage, that's when change happens. That's when your community slowly starts to unthaw almost. They've been frozen, or your family or whatever it is, it's almost like the unthaw happens. And that's where the fear is, though. Because once we open up that door and we start talking, it's really hard to shut the door again. And so then are you able, and I think this is the question, the consequences of that, are we able to support that change within ourselves, within our families, within our communities? Because that's a question we have to ask ourselves, whether you're, again, a man, woman, or child. It's a thought.
And it can be a really painful process from like the tiny community, which is our family and our home, and then our extended family. And that brought, yeah, it is a huge risk and it can be painful. And a lot of people don't like change, right? So that transition can be really bumpy and clunky and hurtful, but it does start. You're right.
Rebecca, I want to add something about, and I don't have all the words, I just have a feeling about it. So one of the things that I always kind of try to talk about to folks is that a person who causes harm doesn't hurt every single person they come into contact with. So it can be so hard. So if you think about gender-based violence, right, especially in Indian country, and the high rates of violence against women and kids in our communities, and there's this sort of a lot of talk about that that's women's work, or that, you know, women are the ones who are primarily on the front lines doing advocacy work, doing rape crisis work, all the things, right? So there can be this, maybe this misinterpretation to say that maybe men shouldn't be saying something, or I don't know what the reasons are, but there's kind of like a lot of reasons, a lot of factors in it. So can we start interrupting that? And can men in their minds understand that just because they have not experienced violence with this particular person, can it be possible that they are a harm doer? And how can I step up and be different and be more vocal, just very direct about it, to say, actually, you shouldn't be here. Like, you better go home. It can and could and should be like that. If a harm doer walks in the room during ceremony, how cool would it be and how powerful would it be to our entire community to model what it would be to just silently, quietly go up to them and say, actually, until you do your work, until you've done your spiritual work and made amends to the people that you've caused harm to, this isn't the place for you right now. Or if it is, if that person is ready to be honest about where they're at in their own lives, in their own journey of trying to reconcile and understand the harm that they've personally caused and are willing to make amends for it, right? Like, that's the part that I think we all get glitched on. We think that sending somebody to jail and having them do their time lets them off the hook for harms that they've caused, right? For me, as a survivor of a lot of violence, what I need is somebody to say, I really messed up. For all of these reasons, I messed up, but I want to make it right. What do I got to do to make it right for my community? And it's going to be different for everybody. Not everybody wants that. But what I need is somebody to say, for all these reasons, for rape as a tool of war, for the boarding school era, for being put on reservations, for having my trees cut down so I can't go find deer or snare rabbits. You've taken all this from me. And to not use those losses as an excuse for causing harm or to try to get your power back by taking it from somebody else, that's the work I want you to do inside your spirit, because I need you. We need you. I'm just like shaking because it's love for my people that drives me to keep fighting for us. So yeah, just do the work, man. Do the internal work, the spiritual work inside necessary to be here for us in our community.
Christine, that was the shit. That was amazing. Thank you. Do the work, right? How do we need them to do the work, right? Stand up. I've heard words, right? I've like tons of chicken scratch. Safety and support. Don't be afraid. You know how easy it is to, in any of it doesn't matter if it's work or basketball or a beading circle man or the grocery store. It really is super easier to just check out and be mean because you feel bad, or someone made you feel insecure, or whatever it is, or someone, you're a survivor of abuse. Where you are, it's so easy to not do that work and just participate in the cycle, because it's an emotional checking out on a daily basis from micro to macro. It takes a lot of effort to heal and not do harm to others. It's so easy to be snarky when someone pisses us off, right? Much harder thing is to take your time and not try to do harm along the way. And that's a really oversimplification of so much harm that can be done. But I love all the comments. I know we're winding down to 15 minutes or so, and we've talked about a lot. Next week, we're going to talk about people that have that power and control, political, influencing, popularity. But for now, when we keep it smaller in our communities and our family, what other things would you like to see? How, as women, what other things do we want to see from them? Are there any other tools or messages that you could give the men and boys that'll be listening, or advocates that are going to have a men and boys retreat next week? What are the things that count?
You know, I think we have to remind men and boys, even girls and women, but I think we have to remind them that we see them, we see you, we hear you. We're not going to ignore you. And that's critical question, or not even a question, but a critical piece of acknowledging people, because so often, how many times do we walk into a room? I think Rebecca, Rebecca, you brought this up. You go to different places even, and how many times do you, just in order to get through whatever it is you're going through, whether going into the store, whether, being in a hard conversation, whatever that looks like, and really acknowledging the people around you or that you are seeing. I see you. I want to hear you, but am I open to doing that? Because what does that make me feel like? Do I have my ancestors on my back? Are my ancestors telling me or helping me to change this behavior so that those 7 generations in front of us are going to have some change? We need to go back and see, have our ancestors healed from this? And if they haven't healed from this, how do we help them to do that in this day and age and presence? And then also, how do we then say, I see you, I hear you, I know you, and I want to be here with you. So again, sometimes it's not really simple, but sometimes it's being that presence.
Like you said, Tami, another thing, like Christine, I know you work with men a lot more, and they're like asking, like, what can I do? What can I do? Or what can I say? Or how can I start up something? Or, but it is having the conversations with other men, and not feeling, and okay, you can be embarrassed. Sometimes we're all embarrassed when we've never talked about something we've never discussed, or if we don't ask, we'll never know. But sometimes it's just having that person's energy with you, or being seen, like you said, Tami. And most times, I mean, even myself as a young woman, I don't even know what to say a lot of the times. But as long as I'm just sitting there, either on the side, in the front, in the back, wherever you need me to be, I'll be there. And trust that Creator will bless me with the words that I need to say, and they'll come at the right time, and no matter what. But I know that, if we're on public, and I see, if there's a young man in public seeing an interaction or something like that, maybe they, feel nervous about confronting or being, saying the wrong word, and all of the reasons why someone wouldn't confront behavior. But even just putting yourself right by them, or putting yourself in front, in the back, whatever. But if enough of us can just stand in solidarity, stand there, and have that energy be broken up just a tiny bit, where that person doesn't have to feel everything. And sometimes we're not in the place to do that, but a lot of the times we are, and we wish someone would have did the same thing for us. And so we're not always going to have the right words or the right language, and there's always like language barriers to everything. But I know that just having your presence and your energy and your ancestors that are with you, all of it makes a difference. And yeah, so thank you for adding that.
I want to add too that some things when you were talking, Angelica, some specific things are for me, if your instinct is seeing, if I was a man or a boy, young man, and I am living in a home where I am witnessing violence around me, there is, even for me, if I see violence happening out, I have to gauge what am I capable of and able to do to intervene, right? Nobody has the answer. There's never going to be one way to do it. But some suggestions would be, even if you don't confront the person who is committing the violence, can you go to the person who you have an instinct is experiencing the violence and just say, Tami, what you were saying, I see you, I got you. That can go up billion miles to know that somebody sees and believes that I'm experiencing this. As our men work the muscle of learning how to be in our communities and families differently, we'll get stronger and better, and it will be easier, and language will come and spirit will come closer to share skill and development of it, right? If you see something in community and you don't know what to say, if somebody's talking shit about their girlfriend, all you can just do, give them a look, be like, mm-mm. If somebody's trying to talk dirty jokes at the drum, just give them the look, mm-mm, not here. If somebody who's a harm doer comes and sits down with you, say, actually, I need you to step away. Be that bold, and we see it when you do it. It matters. It's like a big beacon of light and love that shines when you step up and make a move like that. And you modeling it for other menfolk to do the same. And then the ones who are hurting us will feel less and less like they have the freedom and the ability and the permission to just do whatever they want to hurt us, right? Because they know that people are watching. Because if women could stop it, we all done would have done. Ben stopped it, right? We need you to step in and step up and be a part of the change. Yeah, good stuff.
That's an awesome, again, you're dropping gems and like dunk, you're doing the thing. That was so good. At the end of the day, it doesn't have to be fight, flight, fight, flight, fawn, or freeze. It doesn't have to be that big. It can be a look. Then you can intervene that way. I love that. That's a great recommendation. Because I think it is hard to stand up and get in someone's face or get between folks in a physical altercation. Like a lot of times, yes, though, like what happened in Philly. And Philly really inspired a lot of this talk. But it can be a look. It can be that quiet, discernment, intentional look, or the quieter ways to make social change. It doesn't have to be like, you don't have to get into a fist fight with everybody. That's not what we're asking from men and boys. But making change in little ways. Yeah, I loved that. Any other?
Say just like really related to, like, yeah, Christina, I was having a lot of similar thoughts that you worded way better than I ever could. But I know for me, what I think I need and what I've seen folks need is people, like for men to be treating us as relatives simply because we're human, because we're spirit, not just because, once they have a daughter, they realize, all of this kind of stuff. No, it's just because we exist. We all deserve the right to be free from violence. We deserve the right to be treated and believed and all this kind of stuff. And it shouldn't matter. Like, you don't need to understand what's happening to love and to be there for people in your life. And I think that, in addition to some of the things that you've mentioned, Christine, I think that, like, what I've been seeing happen a lot is, people will be like, they'll come forward on Facebook and say, they'll name the person who hurt them. And I'll see on the Facebook comments, that's my boy, he wouldn't do things like that. And it's like, no. And I get it, because just because somebody has not hurt you, that doesn't mean that you can, take away from, what happened to somebody else, what that person did to somebody else. And I think that it's hard to reconcile those things. And that's part of the messiness of life is that you can love somebody in one way, but they could also be the person who caused the most harm in somebody else's life. And so I think that it's kind of holding that, and also, but not trying to silence victims in that, and not trying to take away from that. So yeah, being there. So yes.
I have to say one more thing. Because it's about that, Jolene. You know, I'm trying to make it short, but when you really love somebody, you love them enough to hold them accountable, or to create the invitation. And accountable is an English word that has all kinds of baggage with it. But when you really love somebody, you ask them to be the change. You have the bar is not that high or low that they can't be a part of the change, right? And so rather than ignoring it or silencing it or all the things, that when you love somebody, you ask them to be a part of it. Speak up, say something, do something.
In those situations, like when you're talking about on Facebook, and there's family members who are backing up a person who has caused harm to multiple people, or one person, and they're raising their voice, thinking about like how we can frame our language to talk to those bystanders that are supporting or whatever, or just putting it under the rug. And I was like, how do we create spaces for loved ones who are ready to do the work and to identify and be there for harm doers, if that makes sense? I'm like, is there any space where like because I mean, I can go on Facebook and be like, that's not my brother, that's not my dad or my best friend, like what? But if someone was to come to me and message me like, well, what are you going to do about that? Your brother, your friend, like there's of course always defensiveness, but is there language that, like, does everyone know how to speak to a close loved one who is causing harm in a way where they can perceive it and not be super like closed off and just run away or move to a different location or something? So there's just something to think about, popped in my head.
That's one of the messages too. Like there's all kinds of language. There's man haters in this movement, right? All those things. But we titled this, Where is the Love? Right? So we really believe like that's the baseline, is that we have new language now. It's called transformative and restorative justice. It's a real thing to let our relatives or whoever they are, let them know that it does come with love. I love you enough to, I want you to be the best you can be, and you're doing someone harm, and I love you enough to say that ain't right. And then let them know that, where there is trauma, healing is the answer. You can come back from this, you can change, and then you can help others change too. That is a huge message that I think some people don't think exists. Like if they come out or they admit it, or they start to feel responsible, they don't know how to act because they think they're going to be canceled or whatever,
I think, Rebecca, I appreciate that. That's perfect. And transformative and restorative. And that's what we need to do. We need to come from that place of love. Like Linda always says, come as long as it comes from a place of love. And it's true, it works. And if we are coming from a place of love, we love our relatives. I love my sons, my fathers, my uncles, so holding them accountable when it's coming from a place of love will work. And yeah.
And then for those really, I don't think it's the majority, but there are the scenarios where someone just will not admit it and wants to continue being violent in private or in public, or whatever that is, that sometimes where is the love is drawing a line in the sand with some self-love, right? That has to be a part of the equation too. Because some people just, whatever reason, too much trauma, whatever it is, cannot make that transition. And that's when we go and do what Christine recommended. Go stand beside the person and just support them. That's where's the love. Anyway, it is 4. I want to offer time for closing comments, or it's a heavy conversation. Closing thoughts, we'll go. Oh, Tami, go ahead.
I really do think it is about love. And I think that the challenge, and it is a challenge, is being believed that you are loved, even though you know you're doing bad behaviors or bad things. And you may harm other people in that. So when you say to someone, which I have done many times in my life, it's that I love you. I love you because of your heart, because of who you are, because of the things that I have had in a relationship with you. I do not love what has happened and what you have done to this other person. And you have hurt this person, and that person is going to struggle for a long time because of that harm. I do not love that. But you have to separate it from that I love you. And those are the things that can be, it's sometimes, it's almost like, you know, it's a really challenging thing to do. And I think that takes some, potentially some self-awareness as well, because I think you might want to think about, do you love yourself enough to do that?
My closing comment would be something along those lines, Tami, of, you know, I have survived a lot of violence, sexual and otherwise, right? But that is not all of who I am. Your timer is going off for something. I am not just the sexual abuse that I have experienced, right? So as our harm doers are not just only harm doers. Wow, everything's beeping around here. So from a spiritual perspective, holding all of it, the both and, right? That our harm doers are still whole human beings with a spirit who came to this earth at this particular time with this particular journey. You are needed here. Do your work and jump in, right? That would be my closing comments.
Cinnamon, Angelica, Jolene, or Tami, did you want to add?
Yeah, I guess my closing comment would be just be brave, if that makes sense. A lot of our men, you know, from like the Stone Age or whatever, like just being providers, like providers for family, providers for our loved ones, but a good provider that's going to recognize bad behavior when they see it, and one that's going to step up and be brave enough to acknowledge it and move forward in a good way. So.
Well, I love my boys that are adult men. I love my brother, my uncles, my father. And I really want to say to any men that are listening, any men that are wanting to do something, and I think that's it. Say or do something. We love you and we want you here with us. And we want you with, you know, we want you with us. They're our balance. You're our balance. And we're not all perfect. That's for sure. I think Tami was right. We need to make sure that we are making that space to say, hey, you know, I might have messed up, but I'm willing to step up and shift that behavior, change, whatever it is that I was doing. So be there and be brave. Yeah.
I don't really have anything super profound at this point, except for I'm excited. I'm really happy. We've been talking internally about this conversation for so long. And I know this is just, you know, barely scratching the surface of some of those things. And also, but I'm excited for what we can do, you know, within our local communities, within our families, what we can, I don't know, I'm just really excited. And I think that we're at a point in our society where we're at a tipping point where things are going to change. And I think that us being together and having this conversation and inviting more and more people into our circle and lifting them up, I think will just be so wonderful. So that is all.
Thank you so much for the great conversation. I think my closing would be wherever you are and whoever you are, if you hear this in a year or you listen to it this evening or you're live, your involvement is going to change everything. That's it. If you're involved, you will help change everything for someone's life. Yeah, thank you so much. We will be together for the last webinar Wednesday of this month for Bystanders, and we're going to dig into other topics around this, which is people with followings, popularity, leadership, politics, or influencing, and how, let's talk about how that power can be used to perpetuate violence, or how do we as bystanders help interrupt that? So it'll be another great conversation about love. So yeah, good job, everyone. Wopila. Have a great day.